A mother thought she knew her 8-year-old son until the day she was urgently called to his school. What should have been just another routine meeting with the school counselor turned into the most terrifying moment of her life. When the counselor opened the boy's behavior report, her face lost all color. Her hands trembled. And then came the horrified whisper, "Take him home, now." What was in that report? What could an 8-year-old child have done to provoke such a reaction? The truth is even more disturbing than you can imagine.
Sarah Mitchell was reviewing quarterly reports in her small accounting office when her phone rang. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. A perfectly ordinary day. Until it wasn't. The voice on the other end belonged to Mrs. Patterson, the secretary at Riverside Elementary School. Her tone was clipped, professional, but there was something underneath it. Something urgent. "Mrs. Mitchell, we need you to come to the school immediately. It's about Jake." Sarah's heart skipped. "Is he hurt? What happened?" "He's not injured, but Mrs. Henderson needs to speak with you right away. It's important." No explanation, no details. Just that cold edge of urgency that made Sarah's hands go numb. She grabbed her keys and drove the 15 minutes to Jake's school in what felt like both an eternity and an instant. Her mind raced through possibilities. Had Jake gotten into a fight? Was he sick? Had he said something inappropriate? Jake was a quiet child, almost too quiet, some relatives said. He preferred drawing to playing with other kids. He had intense blue eyes that sometimes seemed to look through you rather than at you. But he was a good boy, a sweet boy. He'd never been in trouble before. The school parking lot was nearly empty. Sarah's heels clicked against the polished floor as she walked through the main entrance. The hallway smelled of floor wax and that particular scent of schools everywhere, a mixture of pencil shavings and cafeteria food. But something was different today. Teachers who were usually friendly barely made eye contact. They whispered as she passed. One of them, Miss Rodriguez, Jake's art teacher, looked at her with something that resembled pity mixed with fear. Her stomach twisted. Mrs. Henderson's office was at the end of the administrative wing. The school counselor had been at Riverside for 20 years. She was known for her unshakable calm, her ability to handle everything from playground disputes to serious family crises with steady professionalism. But when Sarah entered her office, Mrs. Henderson didn't look calm. She looked shaken to her core. The counselor was standing by her desk, not sitting. Her usually neat gray hair had strands out of place, as if she'd been running her hands through it. Her face was pale. Behind her, the window showed the playground where children laughed and played, oblivious to whatever storm was brewing in this small office. "Mrs. Mitchell," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice barely above a whisper, "thank you for coming so quickly. Please, sit down." Sarah sat. Her mouth was dry. "Where's Jake? What's going on?" Mrs. Henderson glanced toward the door, making sure it was closed. Then she moved to her desk and pulled out a thick manila folder. Her hands, Sarah noticed, were trembling slightly. "Jake is fine. He's in the library with the assistant principal. He doesn't know you're here yet." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "Mrs. Mitchell, something came to our attention today. Something that concerns us deeply." "What are you talking about?" Mrs. Henderson opened the folder. Inside were dozens of pieces of paper. Drawings. All done in Jake's careful, detailed hand. Over the past 3 weeks, Jake has been drawing during free time in art class. Miss Rodriguez collected these without thinking much of it at first. Children draw. It's normal. But this morning, she looked at them more carefully, and then she brought them to me. Sarah leaned forward. "Can I see them?" Mrs. Henderson's jaw tightened. She slid the first drawing across the desk. It was done in colored pencil. The detail was remarkable for an 8-year-old. It showed a car, a blue sedan, wrapped around a tree. The windshield was shattered, a figure slumped in the driver's seat. And there, in the corner, drawn with careful precision, was a street sign. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She knew that street sign. She knew that tree. "There are more," Mrs. Henderson said quietly. She spread out drawing after drawing. Each one showed the same scene from different angles: the crushed hood of the car, the deployed airbag, the shattered glass scattered across the pavement. And in one drawing, there was a detail that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. A necklace. A silver chain with a small compass pendant, broken in half, lying on the ground outside the car. Sarah's vision blurred. She gripped the edge of the desk. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you all right?" No, she wasn't all right, because that accident had happened 15 years ago, before Jake was even born. And the necklace, that specific necklace, was something no one knew about. No one except Sarah, because she had taken it from the scene before the police arrived. Mrs. Henderson was watching her closely. "Do you recognize what Jake is drawing?" Sarah couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up. The counselor continued, her voice careful, measured. "Mrs. Mitchell, the level of detail in these drawings is extraordinary. The accuracy is disturbing. When I showed them to Principal Morris, he recognized the location. It's the intersection of Oak Street and Highway 12. There was a fatal accident there years ago." Sarah finally found her voice. "How does Jake know about this?" That's exactly what we need to understand. Because when Miss Rodriguez asked Jake what he was drawing, he said something very strange. He said, "I'm drawing what the man showed me. He comes at night and tells me what happened." The room seemed to tilt. Sarah gripped the desk harder. Mrs. Henderson leaned forward. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to ask you directly. Have you ever discussed this accident with Jake? Have you seen news reports, photos, anything that might explain this?" "No, never. I never talk about it." "But you know about it." Sarah closed her eyes. "The person who died in that accident was someone I knew. A long time ago, before I met my husband, before Jake was born." Mrs. Henderson's expression shifted to something between sympathy and deep concern. "I see. Mrs. Mitchell, given the disturbing nature of these drawings and what Jake said about a man visiting him at night, I think it's best if you take him home today. I strongly recommend you consider having him evaluated by a child psychologist who specializes in trauma and unusual behavioral cases." Sarah nodded numbly. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the drawings. Each one felt like a window into a past she had tried desperately to forget. "There's one more thing," Mrs. Henderson said. She pulled out the final drawing. This one was different. It showed two people standing near the wrecked car. One was clearly a man, slumped and lifeless. The other was a woman, standing in the shadows, her hand reaching towards something on the ground, toward the broken necklace. Jake had drawn the woman with careful attention to detail: dark hair, a long coat, and a face that, despite the crude medium of colored pencil, was intended to be someone specific. Someone who looked exactly like Sarah. Mrs. Henderson's voice was barely a whisper. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to take Jake home now. And I need you to figure out how your son knows about something that happened before he was born. Because whatever's going on, it's beyond anything I've encountered in 20 years of counseling children." Sarah gathered the drawings with shaking hands. As she stood to leave, Mrs. Henderson added one final thing. "Mrs. Mitchell, in all my years working with children, I've learned to trust my instincts. And my instincts are telling me that Jake isn't making this up. Somehow, impossibly, He knows. The question is how. And more importantly, what else does he know? The drive home was a blur. Jake sat in the back seat, quiet as always, his backpack clutched on his lap. He didn't ask why his mother had picked him up early. He just stared out the window, humming softly to himself. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The drawings were in a folder on the passenger seat. She could feel them there, like they were radiating heat. When they arrived home, their small two-story house in the suburbs looked the same as it always did. Neat lawn, blue shutters, the oak tree in the front yard where Jake liked to climb. Everything normal. Everything safe. But nothing felt safe anymore. Sarah sent Jake to wash his hands and get a snack while she went upstairs to her bedroom. She closed the door and locked it. Then she pulled out the folder and spread the drawings across her bed. There were 23 in total, each one meticulously detailed, each one showing different aspects of the accident that had killed David Reeves 15 years ago. David. Even thinking his name made her chest tighten. They'd met in college. Sarah was 21, studying business administration. David was 23, working on his master's in civil engineering. He was brilliant, charming, and had this way of making her feel like she was the only person in the world who mattered. They dated for 2 years. Sarah thought they might get married, but David had secrets.
No, I've never seen this before. Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded once. She unfolded it. It was a list. Names and dates. Company names. Dollar amounts. At the top, in David's handwriting, insurance policy. If anything happens to me, give this to the police. And at the bottom, Sarah, I'm sorry I got you involved, but if you're reading this, it means they got to me. Don't let them get away with it. Don't let those people die for nothing. I love you. The paper was dated 3 days before David's death. Sarah looked at Michael, then at Jake, who still stood at the top of the stairs watching them with those knowing blue eyes. He hid it there the last time he came over, Jake said quietly, before the accident. He says he knew something might happen. He says he tried to tell you, but he didn't want to scare you. Michael took the paper from Sarah's hands, read it. His face went pale. These companies, these names, some of them are still operating. Sarah, if this is real, if David really did have proof of a criminal conspiracy and someone killed him for it, then they're still out there, Sarah finished. And if they find out we have this, she couldn't finish the thought. Jake descended the stairs slowly. When he reached them, he took Sarah's hand. His skin was cold. David says you have to be careful. He says they've been watching you for a long time. He says that's why he came back, to warn you, to protect you through me. Jake's voice was still his own, still a child's voice, but the words seemed older, weightier. He says you have to decide soon. Tell the truth or stay quiet, but if you stay quiet, more people will die. The buildings are still out there, Mommy, the bad buildings, and they're going to fall soon. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work. Michael did the same. They kept Jake home from school. The three of them sat at the kitchen table, the red envelope and its contents spread between them like evidence at a crime scene. Michael had spent half the night researching the names on David's list. What he found was disturbing. Meridian Construction went bankrupt, but the key players didn't disappear. Thomas Brennan, the CEO, started a new company called Apex Development. James Corrigan, the chief inspector, who David claimed was taking bribes, now works for the city as a senior building code official. And Robert Yu, the accountant who allegedly hid the bribery payments, is a financial consultant for several major construction firms. So they're all still in the industry, still in positions where they could be doing the same thing. Worse, Brennan's company has contracts all over the state. They've built 3 parking structures, 2 office buildings, and a shopping mall in just the past 5 years. Sarah felt sick. And if they're still cutting corners, still falsifying reports, Eventually, something's going to fail and people are going to die. Jake sat quietly, drawing. He'd been drawing all morning, not accidents this time, but buildings. Detailed architectural sketches far beyond his years, each one labeled with an address. Sarah picked up one of the drawings. Jake, where did you see this building? David showed me. He says this one's the worst. He said it's going to fall within 6 months if someone doesn't fix it. He says there are cracks in the foundation that nobody can see because they covered them up with new concrete. The address on the drawing was for the Riverside Shopping Plaza, the same plaza where Sarah took Jake to buy school supplies, where hundreds of people shopped every day. Michael pulled up information about the plaza on his laptop. Built 3 years ago. Contractor was Apex Development. Building inspector was James Corrigan. The same names from David's list. Sarah stood abruptly. We have to go to the police. We have to show them this. And tell them what? Michael countered. That our 8-year-old son is channeling information from your dead boyfriend? Even with David's list, we have no proof. These are just names and numbers from 15 years ago. Any lawyer would argue we fabricated it. Then we need proof, real proof. How? We're accountants, Sarah, not investigators. And if these people really did kill David, what makes you think they won't do the same to us? Jake looked up from his drawing. David says there's a man who can help. His name is Detective Marcus Chen. He was the officer who investigated the accident. David says he never believed it was just an accident. He says Detective Chen will listen. Sarah remembered Chen, a serious man in his 40s who took David's death seriously even when others dismissed it as just another DUI fatality. He'd asked her probing questions about David's state of mind, about whether David had any enemies, about the conspiracy theories David had mentioned. Is Chen still with the police? Sarah asked Michael. Michael searched online. Yes, he's a sergeant now with the Major Crimes Unit. Still works out of the same precinct. Sarah made a decision. I'm going to talk to him today. I'm going to bring David's list and tell him everything. Everything. Michael looked pointedly at Jake. Not the impossible parts, just the facts. David was investigating a construction fraud scheme. He died suspiciously. I found this list he'd hidden. I'm concerned people might be in danger. That's all Chen needs to know. Michael didn't look convinced, but he nodded. I'll stay here with Jake. Be careful. Sarah gathered the documents, made copies, and put the originals in a safe deposit box at the bank. Then she drove downtown to the police precinct. Sergeant Marcus Chen looked older than she remembered, more gray at the temples, deeper lines around his eyes. But when she explained who she was, recognition flashed across his face immediately. Sarah Mitchell, I remember you. David Reeves' girlfriend. His death was 15 years ago, but I have new information. Can we talk privately? Chen studied her for a long moment, then led her to an interview room. She laid out everything. David's paranoia in the weeks before his death, the construction fraud he claimed to uncover, the list she found. Chen examined the document carefully. Where did you find this? Hidden in my house. David must have placed it there shortly before he died. And you're just coming forward with this now? I didn't know it existed until this week. I was going through some old things and found it tucked away. It wasn't entirely a lie. She just left out the part about Jake leading her to it. Chen leaned back in his chair. You know I never believed David's death was just an accident. Sarah's heart skipped. What? The scene was too clean. Everything too perfectly arranged to suggest drunk driving, but I couldn't prove anything else happened. No witnesses, no evidence of another vehicle. The blood alcohol level was high. Case closed. But you still had doubts. Always. He tapped the document, and if David really did have evidence of construction fraud at Meridian, that gives us motive. The parking garage collapse killed 3 people and cost the city millions. If we can prove the collapse was due to deliberate fraud rather than negligence, we're talking about manslaughter charges at minimum. Can you investigate this? Can you look into whether Apex Development is doing the same thing Meridian did? Not officially, not without probable cause, but and he pulled out a business card. I have a friend who works for the state building inspector's office. He's been concerned about some of Apex's projects. If I give him this information off the record, he might be able to find a reason to do a more thorough inspection of their recent work. How long would that take? Weeks? Maybe months? Sarah thought about Jake's drawing, about the cracks in the foundation hidden under new concrete. What if I told you there's a specific building that might be in immediate danger? She showed Chen Jake's drawing of the Riverside Shopping Plaza. Your son drew this? He's very gifted, but yes, and I'm worried. If that building was built by the same people who built the parking garage that collapsed, and they're using the same fraudulent practices? Chen stared at the drawing, at the careful notation of structural weaknesses. This is remarkably detailed for a child. He's been taking online architecture classes. He's fascinated by buildings. Chen didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded. I'll pass this along, see if we can get an expedited inspection of the plaza. If there really are hidden structural problems, we need to find them before someone gets hurt. As Sarah stood to leave, Chen stopped her. Ms. Mitchell, if David was murdered, the people responsible are still out there. And if they think you know something, you need to be very careful. Watch your surroundings, vary your routine, and if anything unusual happens, anything at all, you call me immediately. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of his warning settle over her shoulders. She drove home taking a different route than usual, checking her mirrors constantly. Every car behind her felt like a threat. Every glance from a stranger felt loaded with menace. When she arrived home, Michael met her at the door. His face was pale. What happened? Sarah asked. Someone was here while you were gone. They didn't break in, but Jake says a man was standing in our backyard watching the house. Ice flooded Sarah's veins. Did you call the police? By the time I looked, he was gone. No sign of forced entry, nothing taken, but Jake swears someone was there. They found Jake in the living room, building an elaborate structure with his blocks. When Sarah knelt beside him, he looked up with those two knowing eyes. David says they know you went to the police. He says you need to be ready. He says it's going to happen soon. What's going to happen soon? Jake just returned to his blocks, building higher and higher.
She dismissed it as new mother emotions, hormones, exhaustion. But it had never gone away. That sense that Jake was more than just her son. That something old and knowing lived behind those young eyes. The bathroom door splintered. Jung's foot came through the lower panel. I'm sorry, Sarah, for all of this, for leaving you that night, for not being strong enough to protect you then. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving you again. Jake stepped forward, toward the breaking door. His small hand reached for the lock. Jake, no! Sarah grabbed for him, but he was too fast. He unlocked the door and pulled it open. Jung stood in the doorway, gun raised. His face was cold, professional. A man who'd killed before and would kill again without hesitation. Smart boy, Jung said. Step aside and let me talk to your mother. Jake didn't move. He stood in the doorway, blocking Jung's path, his small body impossibly still. You can't hurt her, Jake said. But the voice that came out wasn't a child's voice at all. It was deeper, older, David's voice. You killed me once, Jung. You ran me off that road and watched me die. But you can't kill me twice. And you're not touching her. Not now, not ever. Jung's professional composure cracked. His face went pale. That's not possible. You're dead. I made sure you were dead. You did. And I've been waiting 15 years for this moment, for the chance to look you in the eye and tell you that you failed. You killed me, but you didn't stop me. The evidence is out there. Your boss is in custody. Corrigan is talking, and you, Robert Yu, are going to spend the rest of your life in prison. Jung raised the gun, pointed it at Jake's chest. I don't know what kind of trick this is, but it ends now.
A voice came from behind him. "Drop the weapon." Chen stood at the top of the stairs, his own gun drawn, two uniformed officers behind him. Jung spun, surprised. In that moment of distraction, Jake moved. With impossible speed and strength for an 8-year-old, he kicked Jung's knee. The joint buckled. Jung fell forward, his gun clattering across the floor. The officers rushed forward, pinning Jung to the ground, reading him his rights. Chen picked up Jung's gun with the handkerchief, securing it. Then he looked at Jake, really looked at him. And Sarah saw the recognition in the detective's eyes, the understanding that something impossible had just happened. "How did you know to come?" Sarah asked. "Your phone cut off. I was already suspicious. I called for backup and came immediately." Chen's eyes never left Jake, and I'm glad I did. Michael appeared at the bottom of the stairs, holding an ice pack to his head, confusion written across his face. What the hell just happened? Sarah swept Jake into her arms, holding him tight. She felt his small body relax, felt the tension drain out of him. When she pulled back to look at his face, his eyes were his eyes again. Young, scared, a little boy who'd just been through something traumatic. "Mommy, did I do something bad?" "No, baby, you did something incredibly brave." 2 weeks later, Sarah sat in Chen's office, giving her official statement. The investigation had expanded. Federal prosecutors were involved. The evidence from David's USB drive had opened up cases in 3 states. Brennan, Corrigan, and Jung were all facing multiple charges. The plaza had been condemned and was scheduled for demolition. And David's case had been officially reclassified from accidental death to homicide. Jung, facing life in prison, had confessed to forcing David off the road that night. Brennan had paid him $50,000 to make sure David's investigation died with him. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. Chen closed his folder. "Now, you go home, be a family, try to return to normal." "Normal?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "I don't think we know what that means anymore." "No, I suppose you don't." Chen leaned back in his chair. "Off the record, what do you really think happened with Jake? How did he know all those things?" Sarah had prepared an answer, a rational, scientific-sounding explanation about gifted children and photographic memories and coincidence. But looking at Chen's eyes, she knew he wouldn't believe it. He'd seen Jake that night, heard that voice, witnessed that impossible moment. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "that some connections can't be broken. Not by death, not by time, not by anything. And I think David loved me enough to find a way back, even if that way seemed impossible." Ten nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I believe you. I've been a cop for 25 years. I've seen things that can't be explained, witnessed coincidences too perfect to be random. And I learned a long time ago that the universe is stranger and more mysterious than we like to admit." He stood and extended his hand. Sarah shook it. "David was a good man," Chen said. "He deserved better than what happened to him. I'm glad he finally got justice, however it came about." Sarah drove home as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. When she arrived, Michael and Jake were in the backyard playing catch. Jake's laughter rang out pure and bright, the sound of a child without burdens. Michael saw her and waved. Jake ran over, throwing his arms around her waist. "Mommy, watch me throw. I can throw all the way to the fence now." Sarah ruffled his hair, looked into his eyes. They were bright, clear, entirely Jake's. That night, after Jake was asleep, Sarah went to her closet. She pulled out the small box, the one with David's broken compass necklace. She held it in her palm. The needle was still frozen, still pointing nowhere. Except, as she watched, it moved. Just a fraction. Just enough to point toward Jake's room. Pointing home. Sarah closed her hand around the compass. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for protecting us. Thank you for loving us enough to never really leave." She thought she felt something then. A warmth, a presence. The sensation of being held, just for a moment, by arms she'd thought she'd lost forever. And then it faded, but not entirely. Never entirely. Because some love is too strong to die, some connections too deep to sever, and some souls too determined to let darkness win. Sarah placed the compass back in the box, closed the lid, and went to check on Jake one more time. He was sleeping peacefully, his small face relaxed, one hand tucked under his cheek. A normal 8-year-old boy, her son, and maybe, in some way she'd never fully understand, something more. She kissed his forehead. "Sleep well," she whispered. "Both of you." Then she closed the door softly and walked down the hall, toward her own room, toward Michael, toward the future they'd build together. A future bought with sacrifice, protected by love, and forever touched by the impossible. So, what do you think about this disturbing story? Could a child really carry memories from a life that ended before they were born? Or is there a more terrifying explanation for what Jake knew? Was it really David's spirit protecting his family? Or was it something else entirely? Something we're not meant to understand? Share your opinion in the comments below. Tell us your theory about what really happened that night 15 years ago. And tell us what you believe about the connections that bind us, even beyond death. If this story intrigued you, captivated you, or left you questioning everything you thought you knew about life and death, then subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We bring you stories that challenge reality, that push the boundaries of what seems possible, and that remind us that truth is often stranger than fiction. And don't go anywhere, because up next, we have another story you won't want to miss. A teacher discovered a diary hidden in her classroom. What was written inside revealed a dark secret that put her own life in danger. A secret that had been buried for 30 years. A secret that someone was willing to kill to protect.